What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. And we have quite a bit to talk about, such as the U.S. Women's Volleyball National Team. They have three-peated by winning the VNL for the third straight year. Yes, the U.S. women's team got the job done, defeating Brazil in the final and defeating Turkey in the semifinal. Well done, everybody, on the U.S. women's volleyball team. I knew they would get the job done. Everyone was freaking out about that loss to China. And let me just say, there was nothing to freak out about. So we'll be recapping those two matches. Also, we have some big NCAA volleyball transfer news, as a couple of big teams have made a significant splash when it comes to transfers, as it comes from two Power 5 conference teams. Who are those two big Power 5 conference teams that made a big splash in transfers? Also, the NBA playoffs are getting closer and closer, which I'll be talking about that in a little bit. And also, one NCAA women's volleyball player is up for an ESPY award. Who is she, and how big is it? All that and more here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on iSports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome one, welcome all to another edition of Set Point. Thank you for joining me on this beautiful Tuesday afternoon for episode 96 of Set Point. And yes, we have a lot to talk about today, whether it is professional volleyball or whether it's NCAA volleyball. Set Point here is here to talk about it all. So without any further delay, let's get on into the volleyball news. But first and foremost, we actually have some sponsors we have to go over. Our official sponsor for iSports Radio is the Southern California Warriors semi-pro football team. The world of semi-pro sports is unlike any other sports organization. Players pay to play in hopes of so many different outcomes, whether it's playing to get film, to try out for professional teams, big-time colleges, or just playing to stay in shape. No matter what, all semi-pro players have one thing in common, and that's their love for the game. The SoCal Warriors have been on a quest to earn titles and give players second chances since 2017. Whether you're in Southern California or anywhere in the world, give semi-pro sports a chance if you love your sport. You may get that second chance you have been waiting for as an athlete. You can follow them on social media at SoCal Warriors, on Instagram at Southern California_Warriors, and they are also on Facebook. If you type in the word Southern, the word California, then the word Warriors in the search bar. So definitely do check out Southern California Warriors, and thank you to SoCal Warriors for being the official sponsor of iSports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And definitely do follow iSports Radio on Instagram and on Twitter at iSports Radio. And also, iSports Radio has a website, and they're on Facebook, even though I don't know how many people still use Facebook nowadays, but I digress. And we are on many platforms such as Spreaker, iHeartRadio, such as this show, Spotify, Podcast Addict, SoundCloud, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, the list goes on and on. And if you go to the Spreaker link, then you don't have to pay anything. You could just listen on in by pressing the play button. And if you have a Spreaker account, then you could definitely tune in and chime into the chat room, as we have some guests here in the chat room. Larry B saying, "Let's go, Teran," and Adam Karnick says, "Finish the night strong." And Gina G, aka Reppin' to NorCal Sports, saying, "I'm here, have a great show. I somehow clicked on last week's show, LOL." Well, great to have you three in the chat room. So, without any further delay, let's get on into the volleyball action. So, we're actually going to shuffle things around a little bit. So, I was going to talk about the VNL, but actually I'm going to talk about the women's volleyball transfer news, because there aren't too many as of late considering compared to last week. Last week we had like 10. This, from the span of last week over to today, there's only like 8. So we might as well just knock the college volleyball transfers out of the park. So the first college volleyball transfer, and no players have re-entered the have entered the transfer portal. So now let's get on into the transfer portal. So first up we have Grace Rigsby of Georgia Tech, who is transferring from there over to UMBC. She is a 6'2" opposite, and she's a graduate student, so she is going to be taking that 5th-year option, as the NCAA has given all NCAA women's volleyball players a 5th-year option, considering COVID-19 was a thing. And UMBC is getting a pretty good hitter from Georgia Tech. Unfortunately, she didn't get to see too much time with the Yellow Jackets, as she basically had to play second or third fiddle to Mariana Brambilla and several other players. But she'll be able to get a new fresh start with UMBC. So we'll see how she does. And then also we have Sheridan Genesis, who is transferring from Colorado State over to Jacksonville. Genesis is a 6'1" middle blocker, and she's a junior. It's looking like she is currently a junior, so she's going to be a senior next season. So she'll have 1, if not 2 years left on when it comes to her NCAA eligibility. So Genesis is going from the Mountain West Conference over to Jacksonville. So she's going from Colorado State to the second Sunshine State in Florida. So I guess that's pretty cool. So best of luck to her. Then when it comes to another Colorado State player, we have Brianna Runnels, who is transferred from Colorado State, and she's heading over down south to Tennessee, as she'll be transferring to the University of Tennessee. Runnels is a 5'10" outside hitter, and she's a graduate student. Considering Tennessee has a decent amount of talent already, and they did get a player from Wisconsin, I think this is somewhat of a good get. She's only 5'10", which, again, most outside hitters are like 6 feet, but it doesn't matter the size of the hitter. It matters the hops of the hitter, in my opinion. So I think Tennessee is loading up for hopefully a good season, as they just barely missed the NCAA tournament last year. They were the first 4 teams to not make it. So we'll see if the Vols can get in this year. And then we have, in terms of the big transfers, we have Serena Gray from Penn State, as she is transferring from Penn State over to, drumroll please, to Pitt. So she's still staying in Pennsylvania, but she is transferring over to Pitt, as she'll be going from Big Ten to ACC. And Serena Gray is an All-American, and this is huge for the Panthers, as Serena Gray also adds depth in the middle blocker position, and she also adds firepower, because Pitt already has many players that are returning, like Chinazi Endy and Kayla Lund that have returned. And then I think they still have Sabrina Starks. But this is a huge, huge pickup for Pitt, as basically this gives them more depth in the middle blocker position. As Adam Karnick also says, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. That's kind of the pun I was shooting for, so I'm glad someone kind of got that reference. But back to Gray, this is a huge pickup for Pitt, as they won the ACC last year, and considering how good the ACC is, oh, actually, no, they didn't win the ACC. They were 1 game behind Louisville, which unfortunately Louisville didn't get to fully play their schedule, as they didn't get to play their second game against Notre Dame, which probably could have swung the conference championship to Notre Dame or Pitt, but it still remains to be seen. So overall, I think Pitt just got a lot better, and if there's any sort time of year that Pitt should win the NCAA championship or have a good chance at winning the NCAA championship, it's most likely next year, because Pitt almost made it to the Final Four, because Previously, before this season, they hadn't made the Final Four in its team's history. The furthest they've even gotten was the round of 16. But now with Serena Gray and with a bunch of other players returning, I think this team is going to be somewhat special this upcoming year. So we'll see what happens when it comes to Pitt this upcoming year. Then we have Micah Allison, who is transferring from Illinois, which is Adam Karnick's neck of the woods, over to Florida Atlantic, as she will be playing beach volleyball for Florida Atlantic for the Florida Atlantic Owls, as Micah Allison is a 6'1". She's listed as 6'1", and it doesn't matter what position she plays because she's playing beach and there is no middle blocker, outside or right side position. As Allison is also a graduate student, so she'll be using her one remaining year of eligibility left for the Owls, as she will bid farewell to the Fighting Illini, so there's that. Then we have Alana Walker, who is from Northwestern, as she is transferring to Virginia to play for the Cavaliers. Keep in mind, Virginia did have to pretty much cancel the rest of its season due to COVID and whatnot. Walker is listed as a 6'3" middle blocker, and she's a graduate student, so she does add some depth to the Cavaliers. Virginia really struggled last season as they didn't win a game, and then once again they had to cancel their season because of COVID. Hopefully everything does get squared away. They should be fine this year, and adding a player such as Walker, that's huge right there. So then we have Alexis Philippone, who is transferring from Pepperdine to TCU, as she'll be playing beach volleyball there. Philippone is a 6'2" player who is a graduate student, so she will continue her beach volleyball career in the NCAA at TCU. So she's going from California to Texas, which is kind of surprising but kind of cool. So I'm interested to see how and what she could bring for the Horned Frogs, who made their first NCAA tournament appearance this season. So hopefully she can make a big impact for the Horned Frogs' sake. So we'll see what happens come that beach season. And then the last and most recent one that happened before I went live with Set Point, I actually just got this notification minutes before I went live with Set Point. We have Shannon Scully, who entered the transfer portal during the NCAA tournament. She still got to play for Pepperdine, but she entered the transfer portal as she took her fifth-year option of playing in the NCAA, as she is transferring from Pepperdine to... Can we get a drum roll, please? And keep in mind that Shannon Scully is a 3-time West Coast Conference outside hitter, but she will be transferring to USC, as she'll will be playing for the Women of Troy and in the Pac-12 this upcoming season. Now, this to me is kind of not really surprising because she actually knows one of the players at USC, being Mia Tuaniga, as the two players played high school volleyball together back at Mater Dei High School. So this is not surprising at the very least, but this is huge for USC, as now they have quite a good amount of depth on their roster, and they've got some firepower, which is very, 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 very good. Because USC kind of needed it, considering they had such a abysmal year, and they lose quite a bit of players from last year's team, such as Brooke Botkin, aka the Houston Rockets. So, speaking of USC, there's actually some other news regarding USC's women's volleyball team, and I actually talked about it on the SoCal Supreme Sports Show, as this actually comes from, it's not really bad news, but it's news that means that one of USC's players is going to be departing. So, Alexandra Gricka, aka Ola, who is a starting middle blocker as a sophomore middle blocker, will be playing professionally in Poland with the Capital Legionowia Legionowu. I probably butchered that, but Ola Gryka is going to be playing in Poland professionally. And she's only a sophomore, keep in mind. So the fact that she's already playing professionally speaks to high volumes of how talented she is. And she is listed as a 6'3" middle blocker, and she got to appear in 14 matches. And unfortunately, she was unable to join the 2019 team due to unspecified reasons, but she was able to join the USC team this season. I guess this was technically her sophomore year. I guess she already played her first year. She already used up her first year of eligibility, so this is quite the tough loss for USC, losing Gryka, as she really does have quite a bit. She has a big arm, and she also provides a lot of depth in the middle blocker position. But unfortunately for the Trojans, she's going to be departing for Poland. But she's going to be making that money, which is really good for her. So, and she gets to go back to her hometown, as she is from Warsaw, Poland. So that is awesome sauce right there. So I do wish her the best going forward. Unfortunately, it is sad face for USC fans, but she's going to kill it in Poland. So I wish her the best going forward, and I'm sure USC fans also wish her the best as well. But at the very least for USC, they did get Shannon Scully, who it has a big-time arm, and I personally think she's going to make a big impact for the Trojans, especially since they do lose Brooke Botkin, who was one of their All-Americans. And I think she'll adapt well to Brad Keller's system. And she doesn't have to go far. So this is a good decision by her. Not just because I'm a USC guy, but I think she's joining a great culture. She's joining a great team. She has that volleyball experience that she'll be teaching the younger players. And again, she'll be reuniting with one of her former high school teammates, Mia Tuaniga, who didn't get a chance to play because Long Beach State, along with the other Big West Conference teams, didn't have a season. So it stinks, but it is what it is. So that's that for the college volleyball transfer news. As once again, Shannon Scully and Serena Gray were the big time transfers. They were the ones that really stuck out to me. Again, there are only 8 transfers from today all the way back to last week when I concluded my show. So if some other transfer news do pop up, then I will let you all know. But for now, that is that for the women's volleyball transfer news. So we're just going to close the book right there, and that's kind of going to be my thing for Set Point every week. So there's that. So there's actually some other news involving some NCAA women's volleyball players. This one actually comes from Nebraska, and this one actually came about 2 hours before this show came on. And this one actually came on, then this news came from volleyballmag.com, but this was actually tweeted out via former Set Point guest Emily Eman, as according to John Cook, 4-time All-American middle blocker Lauren Stivrins will be returning to Nebraska, and she will be able to play, but she will only be able to play as long as her back is able to, as she had surgery following the spring season. So I don't know how long back surgery takes, but hopefully for Stivrins' sake, as well as Nebraska's sake, that back of hers won't have to be carrying the team too many times. And hopefully for Nebraska's sake, they could put it all together. Because they do return most of their players, such as Stivrins and Lexi Sun. And then they still have a bunch of other young, talented players as well, as Nebraska is looking to win the NCAA championship for the first time since the 2016 season, I want to say. I think it was 16, if not 17. But regardless, Nebraska is looking to win the NCAA championship for the first time in this decade. As also in the article, John Cook still didn't like the Texas's tweet where it says all sky and no sun, which was basically a jab at Lexi Sun, who actually used to play at the University of Texas until she transferred to Nebraska. And that tweet eventually got taken down, but a lot of Nebraska fans were irate when the University of Texas saw that tweet when it said all sky and no sun. This was basically Skylar Fields, who is a player on Texas, I guess, blocking Lexi Sun or getting a kill against Lexi Sun. So, Twitter beefs, Twitter puns, Twitter everything. Twitter is not real life. Just saying. As we say hello to Davidson Crooks, who says, "What's up?" Nothing much, Davidson. Unfortunately, there is no transfer news involving Alabama, but hopefully the Crimson Tide can have a good season. Last year was not that great for them, but they did put together a somewhat big win over Tennessee. It's not as big as beating Kentucky or Florida or Missouri, but it's still a pretty decent win for a team that just did not have the greatest season out there. So there's that right there. Definitely do check out Davidson Crooks and his show Fast Break along with Dentarius Locke every Sunday at 5 p.m. Pacific Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And also today on iSports Radio, we had plenty of shows go on before this one. Just now we had Adam Karnick's show, Chi-Town Weekly, just end. And then a couple hours earlier from now, we had Reppin' to NorCal Sports with Gina G go live as she talked about Northern California sports. Adam Karnick talked about Chicago sports, and he talked a lot about Chicago sports. This was probably the busiest that Chi-Town Weekly has been. And then 3 hours before this show went on, we had the defining moment with Larry B as he talked about all kinds of sports, such as soccer, hockey, basketball, even Formula One. As this show, Set Point, is basically the final leg of today's show run in Monday Mania. So there's that. And Davidson Crooks says they'll bounce back. He's referring to Alabama. So I agree. I think they'll eventually bounce back. I'm sure they will. So next up in terms of NCAA news, we have the schedule release for Florida's women's volleyball team, as well as Penn State's women's volleyball team. The Penn State women's volleyball schedule release was just recently released today, as it was released 6 hours ago, whereas Florida's schedule was released about almost a week ago. It was released last Tuesday. So we'll jump into Florida's schedule since that was the earlier of the two, as Florida kicks off its season in Northern California. Hint, hint, Gina. So Florida kicks off its season in Northern California in the Sacramento State Tournament. The Gators kick off their season against San Francisco on August 27th. And then Florida plays UC Davis the day after, and then they play host school Sacramento State on August 28th. So there's those three matches out the window. So I think Florida will be able to win all three of those. I think UC Davis is probably the most formidable of the three, but Florida's just way too good. I'm sorry to all the Northern California fans. I'm sorry to the San Francisco, UC Davis, and Sacramento State fans, but Florida is just that good. Like, they did lose a few players to transfers, but I think this team is just too good, man. But that's not all the Northern California teams that Florida will be playing. Oh no. Florida still remains in Northern California as they're going to play Stanford on August 31st. So this kind of makes me wonder, will Florida just stay in Northern California, or will they just fly back from Northern California back to Florida, then go back to Palo Alto to play Stanford? That's something that kind of pondered me. So it's just some food for thought right there. who knows? But Stanford should be better than they were this year. Like, this year was just so tough for them, considering they had only one senior, and that one senior got COVID, and then she came back, but unfortunately most of the other players got hurt or they got COVID as well. It was just a mess of a year for Stanford, so hopefully the Cardinal does come back strong next season. I'm sure they will, though, because one bad year does not define a historic program such as Stanford. Although it was the first time in, I think, 39 seasons that Stanford had missed the NCAA tournament, which, again, it was just a tough year, and the Pac-12 didn't do Stanford any favors by allowing them to schedule non-conference matches to help their ailing record. It would have been great for them to get other matches in, against other NorCal teams or against other teams in California. It did not help that the Pac-12 prevented Pac-12 teams from going out of conference. But I digress on that. So back to Florida. Florida on September 5th has a matchup against Minnesota. That is a huge matchup considering Minnesota is one of the premier teams in the Big Ten, and then Florida is one of the premier teams in the SEC. I think that's going to be a fun little matchup right there. And then on September 10th and September 11th, Florida will stay at home as they play Baylor. So that's two big matches right there right off the bat, as the Gators have to contend with a very talented Baylor team that features Yasonia Presley and Maddie Skinner, who transferred, it was Avery Skinner. Avery Skinner transferred from Kentucky. So that was my bad. I'm getting the Skinner girls mixed up. So Florida does have to contend with Baylor, who has Avery Skinner and Yasonia Presley and a few other talented players. Baylor is going to be good for years to come. I know it because they had a lot of players. I think they had over 20. And then they had to redshirt a bunch of them. So there's that. So that's going to be a fun matchup between Florida and Baylor. And then on September 15th, Florida is going to have to travel, not too far though, but they'll have to travel to Tallahassee to take on Florida State, which, once again, that's going to be on September 15th. That's going to be a fun little rivalry game. Florida State really showed a lot of strides in the spring of last season. Unfortunately, they just couldn't make the NCAA tournament. They didn't have quite the good amount of wins to get them into the tournament. So I'm going to be interested to see how Florida State can deal with their big sister Florida. I'm sure Florida's going to win, but I wouldn't count Florida State out just yet. So there's that. And then wrapping up Florida's non-conference schedule, they play Coastal Carolina on September 18th and September 19th. Coastal Carolina, like I said, they had such a great year. Unfortunately, they missed the NCAA tournament because they were the runner-up in the Sun Belt Conference tournament. They lost to Texas State in 5 sets as Coastal Carolina lost its big outside hitter in Anna Nemeth. I have been hearing that she isn't returning this year, as she might be playing professionally, but I haven't fully confirmed that. If Coastal Carolina loses Annette Nemeth, then that's big trouble for the Chanticleers. So we'll see what happens to them. But that is the non-conference schedule for Florida. This is kind of a manageable non-conference schedule, as Florida does have returning talent such as Thayer Hall returning. But that Minnesota matchup is going to be crucial. The Baylor matchups are going to be very tough. And the Stanford one is not guaranteed to win. Stanford will have a bunch of their players returning. So we'll see how it goes. So then, starting off the SEC schedule for Florida, Florida plays Mississippi State on September 23rd and 24th in Florida, so they'll be at the Swamp, or whatever they call their gymnasium. I like to call their gymnasium the Swamp because it's basically dark, and that's where Gators live and whatnot, so there's that. And then on September 29th, Florida travels to GA as they'll play Georgia. for a nice little road match. So here's the thing about Georgia. Last year, Florida lost to Georgia in one of the matches. I think they lost at Florida, which was kind of a disappointment loss right there. I think that loss really hurt Florida in the long run. It didn't wind up mattering in the slightest, but it was just an ugly loss for them, and it really made me doubt Florida as a very talented team. Like, I knew Florida had talent. I'm not trying to say that loss defined them, but it was just not a good loss right there. Like the SEC, of all the SEC teams you lose to Georgia, and not like Tennessee or Missouri, maybe LSU. Like, come on now. And Florida was at full strength. I don't want to hear anyone saying, well, maybe Florida was not at full strength. Nope, Florida was at full strength. So, okay. So, after their matchup against Georgia, Florida returns home to face Ole Miss on October 2nd and 3rd. That should be a fairly simple win for the Gators, so against the Rebels. So, I think they could take them. And then on October 9th and 10th, Florida travels to Louisiana, aka the Bayou, to face LSU. So that one should be a fun one. I don't think LSU will beat Florida, but I think they can challenge them because they have Kylie DeBerg, and I think that maybe, just maybe, they can do some damage. So there's that right there for Florida. And then Florida returns home to face Texas A&M on October 16th. A&M is a fairly decent team. Like, they were kind of average this year. They had such a strong start, and then they disappointed by losing their last 4 in the fall. And then Texas A&M just could not get over that hump. So I'll be interested to see how Texas A&M does this season. And then, Davidson, this one's for you. Florida travels to Sweet Home Alabama to take on the Crimson Tide on October 20th at Alabama. So it's going to be a little bit of a fun matchup for Florida. And then on October 30th, and let's go, before I jump to that October 30th matchup, Florida will have a nice little bye week. That's a long bye right there. October 20th through October 30th. That's basically 10 days. So anyway, Florida will be traveling to Missouri to take on the Tigers of Missouri. So that's that matchup right there. Then on November 3rd, Florida will return home to take on Tennessee in the Swamp. So there's that matchup. Then another little bit of a long break gap as they go from November 3rd to November 12th being their next matchup as Florida plays at Arkansas. Now, Arkansas was a fairly decent team, and they were also another team that were the first 4 teams out from this year's NCAA tournament. And I think they have the potential of maybe challenging Missouri, Kentucky, or Florida. I don't think they'll beat them, but I think they could challenge them. Like, in a pandemic year, Arkansas was never going to make the NCAA tournament because they did not have any good wins, like any standout wins per se, as they eventually fell apart in the end. I think they lost to LSU twice, so there was that right there. And then they also lost to Tennessee too. But Arkansas, Florida should also be a good little matchup. And then on November 17th, Florida returns home as they play Auburn. So something I've been noting from this Florida schedule, they're not playing every team twice. So it's not going to be like last year where Florida got to play everyone twice, like Texas A&M and then Tennessee and then Mississippi State and then Ole Miss and then Georgia. So they're not going to play everyone twice. They're not going to play Auburn twice. They're not going to play Bama twice. Looks like they're not going to play Tennessee twice, and they're also not going to play Georgia twice. So I guess they're having the 2 back-to-back matchups as that 2-game series. So there's that. So that matchup against Auburn is on November 17th. I imagine that matchup against Auburn is going to be their senior night. not to bash Auburn, but I think that's the perfect night to schedule senior night, considering Auburn is not the greatest team out there. But who knows? Maybe Auburn can use that as motivation. It all depends on what the team does. So there's that. And keep in mind, Auburn is coming off of a season where it also had to opt out in the spring because all of its sports basically were put on hold because of COVID. And then the whole Auburn athletics department said, we're closing down Auburn sports for the rest of the year. So there's that. Then back to the schedule from Florida. Then on November 20th and November 21st, we have Florida returning home to take on South Carolina. Now that one's going to be a fun one. South Carolina to me is a very underrated team. And honestly, South Carolina was one of the teams that actually beat Florida last year, as Florida is probably going to look to have a little bit of revenge against the Gamecocks. That it could also be a big matchup, considering South Carolina is basically, I wouldn't say they're a big rival, but they could be up there in the SEC standings. Like, South Carolina has a fairly decent program. It's not the greatest program compared to like Kentucky, but it's pretty much up there. So there's that. And speaking of Kentucky, that is the last matchup of the season for Florida, as Florida will be traveling to the reigning NCAA champions domain, as Florida will be playing Kentucky on November 26th and 27th. That's going to be a very fun matchup, and they definitely got that right. They saved the best matchup for last, as Florida will be playing Kentucky, and that could possibly be for the SEC crown. I'm not trying to say that no one else is going to challenge Florida, but the top two frontrunners for the SEC is basically going to be Kentucky and Florida. Like, everyone else is probably going to be third and below. Missouri is probably going to be third. Maybe South Carolina gets third. Tennessee, if they play their cards right, could get third. Arkansas, the list goes on and on. But that is pretty much that for Florida's schedule right there. And I think it's going to be a fun season for Florida. This is probably going to be a challenging season for Florida to start out, outside of the San Francisco, UC Davis, and Sacramento State matchups. But for now, this is a pretty formidable schedule. So here's hoping Florida can do some damage this year, and we shall see what happens with them. So another team just recently released its schedule today, and that team was Penn State women's volleyball. So Penn State starts the season off against Georgia Tech. Now, I'm actually going to jump to the Penn State website to see what their actual schedule looks like, because the schedule they posted on Twitter via picture is not that good. Alright, so this one is so much better. They did post their schedule officially on their website. So the first matchup is not against Georgia Tech, it's against St. John's. So they got the order incorrectly when it came to their tweeted out version. So, and Penn State is going to be playing St. John's in Orlando, Florida, which is pretty cool. So you'll see why, though. So this is on August 27th that Penn State is facing St. John's, and the time is to be determined. Later that day, Penn State will be playing Georgia Tech, which that's going to be a fun matchup. Like, Georgia Tech has a lot of good talent on their team, and even though they lost one of their players to transfers, that team has a lot of... They have talent, and they made the NCAA tournament, and I think that's a good early test for Georgia Tech, considering Georgia Tech does have some talented players on that team. And again, this was post the year where Georgia Tech won their first NCAA tournament game, and they also did some good. They also did pretty decent in the ACC. Did they do great? No, they didn't. They didn't do all that great. But Georgia Tech does have some talented players like Maddie McKissock, Mariana Brambilla, and Julia Bergman. That was who I was referring to. And they also have a good class coming, and they also have some good up-and-coming talent coming in, such as Nicole Drunick, who is transferring from Nebraska, and then they have a good senior class coming in. So I think it's going to be a fun little matchup for Georgia Tech taking on Penn State. And then on August 28th, the day after, Penn State will be playing at UCF, hence the reason why Penn State is in Florida and playing in Orlando. So that's the reason why Penn State is in this whole little shindig in Orlando, because UCF is hosting a tournament. I think that UCF Penn State game should be fun. It's going to be a sneaky good matchup right there. It's obviously Power 5 conference versus non-Power 5 conference, but UCF always is a perennial NCAA tournament team. The problem is with UCF is that they don't really go far in the tournament, and they wind up, and this year they lost to High Point in the first round, which was like, ooh, that wasn't really fun. That wasn't ideal, UCF. So UCF has kind of got some work to do. Then in the Penn State Classic, which will be held at, you guessed it, Penn State plays Iowa State on Friday, September 3rd. And then on Saturday, September 4th, Penn State plays Oregon State and LSU, which is going to be a really fun matchup. Like, the LSU one could be sneaky good. I don't know about the Oregon State, but it's Power 5 conferences galore, as we get a team from the Big 12, the Pac-12, the Big 12, the Pac-12, the SEC, and the Big 10. So the problem is that those three of those four teams that I just mentioned aren't really the greatest. So again, I'm not trying to bash anybody, but it's kind of the truth. LSU was kind of average at best, but they should be better this year with their transfers. Oregon State was pretty shoddy last year outside of their win against USC. And then Iowa State wasn't really all that spectacular. So there's that right there. Then we have the Big Ten Pac-12 Challenge making its return after COVID decided to derail it last year. So Penn State will be playing, first and foremost, the Big Ten Pac-12 Challenge will be played at Oregon. So Penn State will have the honor of facing Oregon because it's Big Ten versus Pac-12, not Big Ten versus Big Ten and Pac-12 versus Pac-12. Regardless, Penn State will be playing Oregon at Oregon on September 10th, Friday, September 10th, and then on Saturday, September 11th, Penn State will be playing Stanford at Eugene, Oregon, so that's going to be a nice little matchup right there. Then its last two non-conference games of the season will be against Robert Morris and West Virginia. The matches will take place at West Virginia. Penn State will be playing Robert Morris in the first game. We'll be playing them first, and then Penn State will be playing West Virginia second. All these times have yet to be determined, by the way, so there's that right there. So that's that for the Penn State non-conference schedule. Kind of a quick non-conference schedule, as they start the season rather early in late August, and then their non-conference schedule ends in mid-September. Penn State kicks off Big Ten play again at Rutgers. Again, I know Rutgers improved, but Penn State's probably most likely going to win that matchup. But that Rutgers matchup could be a trap game, because 2 days after, Penn State returns home to University Park to play Ohio State on Sunday, which that's going to be a very fun matchup. Penn State-Ohio State is always a fun rivalry, and it's crucial for Penn State because Ohio State beat them twice last season. Well, last spring season, but you get what I mean. So I'm really going to enjoy that Penn State versus Ohio State matchup, and that's most likely going to be on the Big Ten Network. I'd put money on that easily. Then on September 29th, which is a Wednesday, Penn State travels to College Park to take on Maryland. I could see Penn State winning that one easily. Then on Saturday, October 2nd, Penn State travels yet again, this time to Bloomington, Indianapolis to take on Indiana, which, again, I could see Penn State winning that one quite handily. Then Penn State returns home to take on Nebraska on Friday, October 8th. So that Nebraska matchup is going to be fun, considering we never got to see Nebraska and Penn State do battle with one another this past spring. So there's that, and we'll see if Penn State can actually get past Nebraska, because Nebraska has gotten the better against the Nittany Lions, which, I don't know, is Nebraska really Penn State's kryptonite? We'll have to find out. And then the day after, Penn State stays at home to take on Northwestern. I hate saying this about Northwestern, but I don't know if Penn State, they'll be able to defeat Penn State. Like, maybe they'll try to challenge them, but I don't see them winning. So, I'm sorry, Northwestern fans, don't hate me too much. Then on Friday, October 15th, Penn State plays Rutgers at home. That's basically going to be the second matchup between the two teams. It's quite funny because it won't even be a month since the two last played. So there's that. Then on Sunday, October 17th, Penn State travels to West Lafayette to take on Purdue. That's going to be a fun matchup. And this is kind of where the schedule picks up for Penn State, because they have not one, not two, but three challenging road games, starting with that Purdue matchup. Then on Friday, October 22nd, Penn State travels to Minneapolis to take on Minnesota. That's also going to be a very fun matchup, because last spring, the two teams split their series against one another, and I think it's going to be quite the fun matchup. And then on October 23rd, which is a Saturday, Penn State has to go on a red eye and head over to Madison, Wisconsin to take on Wisconsin. That is going to be a quick turnaround, and honestly, that's kind of a little unfair for Penn State, but I don't do the Big Ten schedule, so I can't judge. But after that 3-game road trip, Penn State does return for a 4-game homestand starting on Friday, October 29th against Maryland, which they should win that one nice and handily. Then on Saturday, October 30th, Penn State plays Illinois, so that should also be a fairly simple matchup. I mean, Illinois did take him to 5 last spring, but I don't think Penn State, even though they lost quite a bit of players, will be hurting that much. So there's that. Then on Friday, November 5th, we have Penn State taking on Michigan, and then the day after, which is a Saturday, Penn State will be playing Michigan State. Then, and this is the weird thing. So I said Penn State plays Michigan on November 5th. On November 12th, Penn State has to travel to Michigan to play Michigan, and then the day after, they have to travel to East Lansing to take on Michigan State. So that's kind of an awkward little matchup right there between Penn State, Michigan, and Michigan State. But it is what it is. Again, I don't structure the Big Ten schedule, but that's just me. And then after, and by the way, the two Michigan matchups, that's just the start of a 4-game road trip. On November 19th, which is a Friday, Penn State has to go down to Lincoln, Nebraska to take on the Huskers of Nebraska. That is going to probably be a crucial matchup. That could decide the Big Ten right there. Unless, of course, Wisconsin's just steamrolling everybody, which, if that's the case, then that's not overly surprising. So there's that. And then on November 21st, Penn State travels to Columbus, Ohio to take on Ohio State, which, again, that's going to be a very fun matchup. I'm glad Penn State has a day to travel and then to adapt to Ohio State, because those Ohio State fans are going to be loud and rowdy. I don't know how many of them were there in the Ohio State Penn State women's volleyball match this year at Ohio State, but I could see that place jumping. So we'll see what happens when it comes to that. And then closing off the final road game of the season is Penn State playing Minnesota on Friday, November 26th. And I'm sorry, actually, that's my mistake. Ohio State is the last road game of Penn State's regular season. The second to last home game on on Penn State's schedule is against Minnesota. So that also is going to be a crucial matchup that could have NCAA implications, and it could also mean quite a bit for both teams. It all depends on which team comes up big, and also it all depends on which players are playing for which team. So there's that. And then Penn State's last game of the season is against the tough, formidable, very scary, a team that they haven't seen on their schedule prior to all the matches that I just listed, Iowa. Yeah, you thought I was going to say Wisconsin again now, didn't you? But Penn State does play Iowa in its final game of the season, as I'm pretty sure Penn State will win that one. If not, that'll probably be their senior night. If not, they'll have their senior night against probably like Maryland or Rutgers. Regardless, I can see Penn State winning against Iowa. And that's pretty much it for the Penn State schedule. Penn State's going to have an interesting team because they did lose a good portion of their team due to transfers, but I'm pretty sure they still have one of the best coaches in, if not the best coach in the NCAA, in Russ Rose, who has been the head coach for over 40 years. And in all 40 years, Penn State has not, I repeat, not missed the NCAA tournament, which is downright impressive. So good for Penn State, and here's hoping they have a good season. And I think they'll have a solid season. Last year was a little bit of a tough year as they had to deal with COVID. They didn't get their season started until I think week 2 or week 3. They lost both games to Ohio State, and sorry about that. But Penn State had themselves a little bit of a rough season, and hopefully for their sake they could turn it around and get back on track. If not, then c'est la vie. But I think Penn State will have a fun season. They do return most of their juniors from last year, with the lone exception of Serena Gray. And Penn State always has a great incoming senior class coming in. So, honestly, I don't see Penn State having unless they lose a lot of their games early on, I don't see how Penn State misses the postseason or how they just do bad. Penn State is going to be on everyone's radar, yes, but I think Penn State's going to be out for blood, especially after last spring. So there's that right there for the NCAA women's volleyball stuff that was happening, and all the transfer news, and all the NCAA volleyball player news, and all the schedule releases. Again, season is not too far away. I think it's about less than 2 months from now, which is really cool. But we'll see. We shall see. But that's going to do it for the NCAA women's volleyball portion of this show. We're actually going to take ourselves a quick little commercial break. When we come back, we shall be talking about the Volleyball Nations League Women's Volleyball Championship and how the U.S. was able to come up big. And then we'll also talk about how an NCAA women's volleyball player is nominated for an ESPY. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. You're listening to Set Point here on IA Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. We'll be right back after a word from these drops.
Hey guys, it's Blake Henley, better known as H-Town Blake to some of you. Happy to announce that Bases Loaded is back and in full force. We'll be bringing that high heat every Tuesday night here on IE Sports Radio. So come home, get ready, dig into that batter's box, and see if you can chase that high heat, baby. So we'll be coming to you live with all the stats, all the rundowns, all the division rivalries, and every team that's going to make the playoff push to get to that one and only October and get to the pinnacle of what baseball is, to hoist that Commissioner's Trophy when it's all said and done.
What's good, fight fans? It's your boy, Marcus Los Great, here to give you what you want, here to give you what you need. Yeah, man. Yeah. I'm coming to you live, straight from your mama's basement with a crispy, awesome white tea. We are coming to you live every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Powered by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
That's right, everybody. You could check out every show on IE Sports Radio, from Bases Loaded with Brandon Buckingham, Blake Henley, and Chris Garcia, from Gloves Off from my boy Marcus Los Great, to some of our regional shows, or shows from certain cities, such as Chi-Town Weekly with Adam Karnick, and then we have regional shows, such as my show, the SoCal Supreme Sports Show, and Reppin' to NorCal Sports with Gina G. We have all sorts of shows, and honestly, iSports Radio is just getting started. We got other shows that are on the rise. We actually just got a new Texas show, as it's actually a Texas and Oklahoma show, as that one is called the Red River Rush. Yeah, the Red River Rush. Try saying that 5 times. So, the Red River Rush will be hosted by Brennan Epperson. That's going to be going live every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 6 p.m. Central Time, and 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And that will be taking the place of the Kansas City Shuffle, which will be having its last show of its tenure tomorrow, which is sad, but I'm excited to be a part of it, and honestly, I couldn't be more happy of the tenure and run that the Kansas City Shuffle had. Also, another new show that's going to be on the rise, and another new show that's going to be going live soon, is the Frozen Lakes podcast with Amanda N., as she'll be talking about all things Minnesota. Heck, she could be talking about Minnesota women's volleyball, as I did mention to her that Minnesota does have a great women's volleyball team, and honestly, I can't wait for her to maybe talk about it. It would be really cool. Unfortunately, Minnesota had a disappointing... Well, I wouldn't say disappointing. That's a little harsh, but they did lose in the round of 16 to Pitt, a team that hadn't even made it too farther than the Sweet 16. So there's that right there. And Minnesota is going to be quite fascinating next season. So we'll see. But definitely do check out our new shows and our current shows. And then Set Point is obviously available on a lot of streaming platforms such as YouTube, even though I don't think it's going live on YouTube right now, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, which, I was very surprised to see that Set Point was on iHeartRadio, Spotify, the list goes on and on. So definitely do check out all of our amazing shows and this show as well. And now let's get started with segment number 2 of Set Point. So before we go into the VNL, we actually have some volleyball news, some more NCAA volleyball news that I should share, as Madison Lilley, the setter for Kentucky's women's volleyball team, is nominated for an ESPY award. She is nominated for Best Women's Collegiate Athlete. So that's really cool right there. And you get the chance to vote for her. And I believe Kentucky's pinned tweet has the link to where you could vote for Lilley. And that's actually very cool. It really, really is cool that Kentucky has a player nominated. And I am down to see a volleyball player win Best Collegiate Athlete. And unfortunately, no, their pinned tweet is not does not have the link. But they do always tweet out the link to vote for Madison Lilley for the ESPY award for Best Collegiate Athlete every now and then. So there's that right there. And also, Madison Lilley is nominated for the Honda Cup, and she's also the National Player of the Year. Well, that was already obvious, but she is nominated for the Honda Cup, which is really cool. And she's one of 12 finalists She's one of 12 overall finalists, as she won the award for volleyball, the category of volleyball. So we'll see if she can win the whole kit and caboodle, the big shebang. So there's that right there. And that's just some quick little volleyball news. It's not big-time news. I mean, it is big-time news. It's big that a volleyball player is nominated for Best Women's Collegiate Athlete. And hopefully she does win the award. I will be voting a million times for her just to make sure she represents the sport of volleyball. It would be great to see that happen. So there's that right there. So it looks like I've gotten through pretty much everything. But before I get into some VNL news, I actually do need to make note that the NVA has the NVA playoffs will be starting next week. They start they start next Friday, and I'll be previewing them next week on Set Point. So there's that. And before we get into the VNL, we actually have some more NCAA women's volleyball news, as this news actually came last Tuesday, and this news actually comes from the game of volleyball. And now, in terms of women's volleyball, teams can experiment with new challenge review system rules, as the NCAA Playing Rules Oversight Panel approved an experimental rule allowing women's volleyball teams to begin a match with 2 video coaches challenge and conference matches only for the 2021 season. So basically what this new rule is that if you get 2 challenges per match, and then if the match goes to a 5th set, you get an extra challenge, no matter what happens. If you have 2 stored, you get a 3rd one. There's that. So, yeah. So, when it comes to this whole challenge review system thing, if you have videos up and you use a challenge and your challenge is successful, you retain that challenge. It's basically like the NFL. It's like the NFL and its little challenge system, where if you challenge a play, then and you're successful, then you don't lose a timeout, but you lose a challenge. Whereas if you lose the challenge, you lose a timeout and you lose a challenge. So this little thing it's kind of like the NFL, but it's a little interesting. Like, if I don't know how many times you could do this entirely, but I will say it does make it so that it gets the calls correct. According to this, it says, if the challenge results in the reversal of the original call, the team will retain the challenge. So, for example, if the ball is ruled originally out and then the team challenges saying that the ball was touched or there was a net violation, and the call gets reversed, then the challenge does get retained, and that said team that challenged the call will still have 2 challenges. But it also says that teams would be allowed to carry a maximum of 2 challenges into the 5th set. So, once again, basically, if you go to that 5th set, you get an extra challenge, which means you get 3 challenges, which would be gosh darn cool. And it says for non-conference matches, the current rules that allow each team 3 challenges per match, regardless of the outcome of the video review, will be used. And then each team will be awarded an additional challenge if the match reaches a 5th set. So, for non-conference matches, it's not going to be the challenge will not be retained. But for conference matches, you'll get 2 challenges, and then if you use one of the challenges and the challenge is successful, you will get that challenge back, which is very cool. I actually think this is going to be an interesting rule. Could it have its flaws and could it be exploited? Maybe. My thing is if a team uses a challenge, I think that players should not go back to their bench, because using a challenge could pertain to a free timeout. That's kind of like what happened with the Phoenix Suns and Los Angeles Clippers game in Game 2, where the refs were just reviewing everything, and then players were going back to their bench. Like, I don't know, but we'll see if this rule does have its perks, and it has its flaws, and it has its what's the opposite of flaws? It's perks and its strengths and its weaknesses. So we'll see if it actually works out for that. So chances are it should be beneficial for everybody. But it's only if teams have like video review, which if they don't, then there's no point of having this. Then there will I don't see why, and I think this could also encourage every team, not just the Power 5 conferences, but for every team to like have video review, not just for like big matches, because I one time went to a Long Beach State women's volleyball match, and unfortunately they lost off of a call that was ruled out when everyone thought that the ball was touched, and unfortunately that made a bunch of Long Beach State fans somewhat irate, and it just left a bad taste in the Long Beach State mouth. Regardless, this will encourage everybody to use instant replay and videos, because Long Beach State did not have any videos up in their matchup against UC Davis. So that was kind of a kick to the teeth for Long Beach State. But now it's going to encourage everybody to use videos, no matter which conference, which team, whatever you are. And even if it means like sacrificing seats from like the student section, it's just going to have to be, it is what it is. And honestly, everyone's just going to have to suck it up and just sacrifice a few seats. Because nothing would suck worse than losing off of a call that was not really true when you had a challenge. So there's that. But that's going to be that for all the NCAA news. Now we're officially done with the NCAA rules. Now we could jump on over to the whatchamacallit, the VNL. So the VNL women's champion semifinal was between the U.S. and Turkey. The first semifinal had Brazil defeating Japan in 4 sets, which obviously was good. It was kind of expected, though. So the first set, the U.S. took that first set 25-21. They had 15 kills, 2 blocks, and their opponent made 8 errors. And this goes for errors regarding all the matches. See, professional volleyball does this so differently, or U.S. volleyball or international volleyball has their statistics so differently. Instead of saying the word kills, they use the word attacks, and then they still will use the word blocks, but instead of service aces, they have that terminology serves, which that's kind of weird, but I digress. And then they put service errors into the category of opponent errors, which should mean like hitting errors, blocking errors, net violations, 10 feet line violations, and double contacts, lift violations, all sorts of anything that is basically a violation is basically ruled as an opponent error. And Turkey had 8 opponent errors, or Turkey made 8 errors while the U.S. had 7. So there's that for set number 1. The only ace that Turkey had the only ace in that set went to Turkey, and then the U.S. had 2 blocks, and then the Turkey had 1 block. So there's that. Then in set number 2, the U.S. they actually were trailed by as many as 7, and it looked as if Turkey was going to tie the set at 1-1. But then the U.S. stormed back and took that second set 25-23, as this one was probably the backbreaker for Turkey. Turkey had 10 errors in that set, and they allowed 3 service aces from the U.S., and they also got blocked 3 times at the net. The U.S. only had 1 service error, they only had 1 error in general, and Turkey had 1 service ace, and Turkey had 3 blocks. Turkey had 18 kills in that set, which basically speaks to high volumes of how disciplined the U.S. was. The U.S. only had 9 kills in that set, as Turkey really let the errors catch up with them, and that eventually cost them that big set. So instead of being tied 1-1, Turkey's now down 0-2 to the best team in the VNL. And then in the third set, the U.S. won that third set 25-20, as the U.S. won the match 3-0. Overall, the U.S. had 40 kills as opposed to Turkey's 42 kills. The U.S. had 7 blocks as opposed to Turkey's 6. The U.S. had 4 service aces compared to Turkey's 3. And then Turkey as a whole made 24 errors altogether, while the U.S. had 13 errors as a whole. So the U.S. advanced to the VNL to play Brazil, which was actually the day after. I thought it was going to be like Saturday or something, but it is what it is. As the first set, Brazil and the U.S. got to face one another in the VNL championship game. The first set, Brazil took that first 28-26. Unfortunately, there were no statistics provided by either squad, and I am disappointed because I wish the U.S. had provided the first batch of statistics from both teams. So there's that. Then the second set, the U.S. took that close second set 25-23. In that set, the U.S. had 18 kills compared to Brazil's 14. The U.S. only had 1 block, and Brazil had 4. The U.S. had 2 service aces while Brazil had none, and Brazil only made 4 errors altogether in that second set, while the U.S. made 5 errors. So, all in all, I think the service aces kind of mattered, but both teams played a clean set. The first 2 sets were really tight, as the first set, it needed to go past the cap of 25, while the second set, the U.S. barely won that second set. And then the third set, it was also another close set, as the U.S. won that third set by the same score of 25-23. The U.S. had only 13 kills compared to Brazil's 17. The U.S. had 5 blocks compared to Brazil's 4. Neither team had a service ace, but this was kind of the backbreaker for Brazil. Brazil had 7 errors in that set, while the U.S. only had 2. Again, that speaks to high volumes as to how disciplined the U.S. was, as the U.S. really did not make crucial mistakes, while Brazil, in their defense, they did not make the greatest decisions, but at the same time, playing against the U.S., you gotta play as limit-free as possible. I know you also have to play loose, relaxed, and free, but if you want to beat the U.S. and win a big-time matchup like that, you gotta play careful, and you also gotta play, at the same time, risky. So, to me, I think that third set was also the key to was also the turning point, as Jordan Thompson and Michelle Barch-Hackley both were leading the way for the U.S. Again, they used points instead of using kills and whatnot, so there's that. And then in the fourth set, it wasn't as close as the first 3 sets, but the U.S. took that fourth set 25-21, and they won the VNL for the 3rd straight year, which is absolutely amazing. Congratulations to the U.S. once again for winning the VNL for the third straight year. Here is your applause button. So yeah, that was a big-time victory for the U.S. Unfortunately, we don't have the final statistics, but thanks to the power of the internet and me saving the articles, let's see if I can find the little thingy. Looks like I can't find it. Oh boy, that's fun. That's fun yet awkward. Oh well. I tried, but honestly, that was big right there. As for the teams, now I actually do got to mention the Dream Team. So the Dream Team that was the Dream Team for the U.S. when it came, well, not just the U.S., the whole, it's kind of like the all tournament team. There you go. The all tournament team. The all tournament team basically featured 7 players. And I also should mention that Turkey defeated Japan for third place, which, again, bronze is, as long as you podium, it's good. And it shows that you were able to bounce back. So I'll give the Turkey a little bit of a hand clap. So that is that right there for the tournament, and honestly, it was a great win for the U.S. women's team for winning. I said winner winner chicken dinner, while the U.S. women's or the USA volleyball account said winner winner pasta dinners, which that's pretty funny right there. Like, they said pasta while I said chicken pasta. I guess they don't have the article up, which kind of sucks, but oh well. I guess they didn't have the actual. They had highlights, but I guess they didn't have like the actual write-up, which does make me sad. And oh well, I guess I won't be able to read the full recap, but it's okay. It's okay. I will survive. Oh, here it is. Here it is. This is courtesy of the USA Volleyball website. So, the U.S. women's team is actually ranked number 1 in the world, as they spent more than 5 weeks in Italy, which, now I get why they said pasta dinner. Wah, wah, wah. And they finished the tournament 16-1. And now they turn their attention to the Olympic Games, which will be in Tokyo for the 2020 Olympics. And they'll be participating in the tournament, which will begin on July 25th. So that's going to be another thing to look forward to. So we have the NVA playoffs next week. And then the week after, we'll have, like, I guess a little bit of a bye week. And then on the 25th, which actually starts the whole Olympics, that's actually the week that Set Point's going to have its 100th episode. Barring I don't take any breaks, which I don't think it'll be happening anytime soon. So, we'll see. Also, the U.S. won $1 million for the victory, which is actually, get this. So the $1 million is actually the same prize amount for the men's VNL tournament. So, the whole VNL gets the whole equal pay thing. The women get $1 million, the men get $1 million. It's not like soccer where the women, I guess, get like 100,000 and then, or something like that, and then the men get like 1 million or something. It's not like that. And thank the heavens the VNL has equal pay. Thank you very much, VNL. I appreciate that. Hats off to you. All right, now let's jump on over to the all-tournament team. So the all-tournament team consists of setter Jordan Poulter of USA, Gabby Guimarães from Brazil. I probably mispronounced that name. Guimarães. Gabby Guimarães from Brazil. Michelle Barch-Hackley from USA. Ida Erdem from Turkey. Carol Gataz from Brazil. Tandara Quezada from Brazil. And Justine Wong Orantes from USA. They spelled Justine's name wrong, which is very sad. They spelled it Justien when it's supposed to be spelled Justine. Gosh dang it. And then the most outstanding player of the tournament is... Can we get a drum roll, please? So the most valuable player from the tournament, well, I guess we can call it the most valuable player or the most outstanding player. It's the player that stood out the most. That's what I'm trying to say. So the MVP of the tournament is Michelle Barch-Hackley of USA, which is a great honor for her, and it was a great honor for all the players that got the dream team, that made it to the dream team or the all-tournament team, as Barch-Hackley, Wong Orantes, and Poulter made the team along with the other players that made the all-tournament team. So, congrats to all the players that made the all-tournament team, and once again, congrats to the U.S. on a great run, and for them winning the VNL championship for the third straight year. Congrats also to Brazil, who put forth a great effort. The problem was they just ran into a very talented buzzsaw in the U.S. And then also congrats to Turkey for getting third. I know third is the second loser, but I don't like to think that. I think getting third is a great honor because at least you're medaling. Only 3 teams out of, 15? 16? 16 medal. So the fact that Turkey gets that honor is absolutely amazing. So, and then also gotta give props to Japan for making it all the way to the semifinals. Unfortunately, it just wasn't their Final Four, but they still have the Olympics to deal with and to participate in. So, all in all, this was kind of like the dress rehearsal for the Olympics, as now we're going to get to what truly matters, the Olympics, which will begin on July 25th, which is not too far. It's less than a month away, so I'm very excited to see what the Olympics are going to be like. So I hope the U.S. does do well on the men's and women's side. And speaking of the men's side, I actually do need to wonder when the other VNL championship is going to be. As I need to know when the men's are, and the men's championship is, which, I never really got, they actually, I guess the men already, completed their little run, as they had the championship game on Sunday, which is kind of sad. I actually forgot about this. I'm sorry, men. Anyway, so the Brazil men's team won the VNL championship on the men's side as they defeated Poland in 4 sets. 22-25 was the first set going to Poland. Then Brazil won the second set 25-23. And then the third set went convincingly to Brazil, winning 25-16, and the fourth set went to Brazil in convincing fashion, winning 25-14. So, good job to Brazil, and good job to Poland for getting runner-up. France also won the bronze medal matchup, which, again, I feel rather silly for not knowing this. France defeated Slovenia in straight sets, 25-20, 25-18, and 25-19 to clinch third place. Slovenia finishes fourth, which is cool beans. And that is that for the VNL altogether, as Brazil won the men's. Unfortunately, they didn't double dip, but still a good showing for Brazil as a whole in terms of volleyball. It's just that the women's, once again, faced a very talented USA team. And also, by the way, can I just say this? To everyone who was freaking out about how the U.S. lost to China, the joke's on you. I remember everyone was saying, "Oh my God, the U.S. lost to China in the final match, which didn't matter." Joke is on you, as unfortunately for you, as for all you Karch Karai doubters out there, and yes, his name is actually pronounced Karch Karai, not Karch Kurali, which I actually was mind blown after that. So to all you Karch Karai doubters out there, the joke is on you, as Gina says she's got to go, but great show. Thanks, Gina. I appreciate you. So it just goes to show you that Karch Karai knows what he's doing when it comes to coaching, and that he was very wise to make sure his players did not. He rested his starters, his team starters, and they didn't get hurt. Because if they get hurt in a matchup that doesn't matter, and then they're not able to go in the semifinals, then the U.S. is in deep trouble. And also, you learn a lot more from a loss than you do a win. So there you go right there. So to all you Coach Karai doubters out there, I laugh at you. Ha ha. But that is going to do it for today's episode of Set Point. Thank you all for tuning in for episode 96. Again, next week is the preview of the NVA playoffs. I am very excited because we're going to get some more NVA action happening, and I can't wait for this whole NVA thing to start, because this will be year number 2 of the NVA, whereas last year we did get to see the NVA happening, but it was kind of the inaugural season, which nobody knew what was happening. I don't even think a whole lot of people knew what an NVA was. I thought people were just making this up, but they weren't, because the NVA is an actual thing. The National Volleyball Association is an actual thing. It's not the NBA, it's the NVA. So, on that note, thank you all for tuning in, and it is that time, ladies and gentlemen, to drop that beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Once again, thank you very much for tuning in to Set Point. I appreciate y'all listening, whether you're listening live or you're listening on the playback. I truly, truly, truly appreciate you. It really means a lot that you took time out of your day to listen to me ramble on about volleyball, whether it's NCAA or whether it's professional volleyball and whatnot. Next week is the preview of the NBA playoffs, as I am very excited to see which team will be coming out on top and which team will be falling short. I'm very excited to be talking to you all about that, and I now have a better understanding of what the NBA playoffs are. For everyone here at IE Sports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. Have yourselves a great rest of the day. Thank you to our sponsor, SoCal Warriors, for being the official sponsor of IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. This is Teran Rodriguez signing off. Have a great rest of the day. I will see you Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show, and keep on enjoying some volleyball. Have a great night, everybody.